Hi, my name is Michelle Ferlita and I'm currently working on my Girl Scout Gold Award. My project hopes to sustain and improve the relationship that younger generations tend to have with their Italian culture. As society continues to grow and develop, we tend to lose our connection with our roots. I hope that my project will bring together people of all ages, especially younger generations, with their Italian heritage. My goal for this video is to encourage younger generations to embrace their Italian heritage. I have asked 11 people, all of Italian descent and from varying ages, 10 questions relating to their Italian culture and tradition. I hope that you see how important Italian culture is and has been to society. Whatever your background is, I hope that you embrace your culture and learn all the benefits that come with it. Thank you, and please enjoy the video and make sure to give it a like. Spending time with family and having a good time with them.
So my favorite Italian tradition is getting together on Sundays with the family and just having, just a great reunion every Sunday over pasta and meatballs and of course the Cuban bread from La Segunda.
Well, my favorite Italian tradition is Sunday dinners. Like the entire family gets together and eats on Sunday. Usually like a pasta, like a red sauce or something.
My favorite Italian tradition, eating, of course. It's an easy one.
The traditions today aren't as heavy as they were when I was little, but I guess when I was smaller, the tradition of eating at grandmother's house for Christmas, in some parts of that we still continue, like a Christmas Day we would have Italian sausage, and I still have that with my family now, but the traditions are kind of on the light scale.
My favorite Italian tradition, well, I have memories of growing up, going to my nana's or my parents' house every Sunday eating pasta. You think you're just going there for lunch, but it ends up being a whole day affair. For me, it's dedicated to one thing and one thing only: family and food. You're immersed with your grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, possibly some friends and neighbors, and you all gather around the table and you eat. And you have some kind of pasta with sauce and meatballs, but it doesn't end there. Then you're going to have some roast or chicken, some salad and vegetables, and then you think you're done, but you're not. The dishes are carried away, and then you have fruit and dessert, and then coffee afterwards.
My favorite Italian tradition has to be the holidays, with the special foods and things that you have during the holidays. Especially when I go to my Italian relatives up north, they do there's all the fish dinner on Christmas Eve, and that's a tradition that they've had since my grandmother's time or before. So that's one of the traditions. I like the tradition of it's called piñolata. It's like this pastry that they make at the holidays. That is a nice tradition too.
It would probably have to be Christmas Eve, which is also my husband's birthday, where we have the Feast of the Fishes. So we do a Christmas Eve with all kinds of fish, and of course you have to have a little pasta on the side.
I think my favorite tradition is celebrating Festa della Madonna. I have been in Sicily when they celebrated the tradition. Had that opportunity. It was wonderful, the procession and all the religious things that go along with it. And of course the celebration and the food. And of course we celebrate that here at the Italian Club almost every year as well. So I think that would be my favorite.
I'm not going to focus on a specific festival or some particular event. I think the Italian tradition that I love that I miss now is the more relaxed interaction with your family. Now you have structured dinners or buffets or lunches or brunches. In the olden times when I grew up in Ybor City, my favorite thing was everybody knew they were going to come over on Sunday, for instance, to eat pasta with the sugo. And they knew they were going to come, they knew they were going to spend as long as they wanted to. And it was more interactive in the sense that there was, I think, yelling and screaming is part of what you think about when you think about a relaxed Italian get-together. And it really reflected Italian camaraderie as opposed to very structured dinner where you had your place settings and everybody ate at the same time. And this is just like crazy, and I loved it. And we were poor, of course, so we didn't have anything real fancy. But it kind of it didn't take away from that tradition. It actually added to it because everybody just came over and it was a very casual, relaxed, not very sophisticated type time, but everybody sure had a good time, and all of us looked forward to the next Sunday when a bunch of crazy Italians would come over again, or we would go to their home, and we would eat pasta and we would have a great time.
My favorite Italian tradition? Well, I think family unity. And the reason for that, throughout the centuries of Sicily, 13 invasions and so forth, the Italian family, the Sicilian family, could not trust anyone. They couldn't trust the army, couldn't trust even the church, the police. They couldn't trust no one except the family. So throughout the centuries, the trust of the family remains. And the unity of the family is what counts.
No, but my favorite word is baci, surely because my dog's name is Baci.
So unfortunately, I do not speak Italian, but I've been raised where my grandparents do speak Sicilian. And of course I hear words like shkanda and stunata.
I can understand it better than I can speak it, but my favorite Italian phrase is the word omerta. I mean, it's like a code of silence sort of thing within the family.
I don't speak any Italian fluently. I know some words. I remember being a very young boy growing up, and my great-grandparents were Italian. They spoke the language to each other, but they never taught it to their kids, nor would they let the grandkids speak it because they were concerned about assimilation when they came to the United States. So, unfortunately, I don't know much.
I don't speak Italian, although I did try sincerely. When I've gone to Italy, I have learned some simple phrases, and of course we know different foods, and basically Italian menus is about the furthest Italian I can really speak.
I don't unfortunately speak Italian, but I know an abundance of words and phrases hearing my family speak it. There's much more of you can have an understanding without speaking fluently. But what I remember most is like the family calling me Pupita or Shugita, or when you leave to be careful, they'll say Nene cure. And of course, even as you approach and they ask you, are you hungry? And they put food in front of you, mangia, mangia, whether you're hungry or not.
I don't speak Italian, and I have to tell you now, at my age, I'm disappointed that I didn't learn when my aunts and uncles were all alive, and my mom, they spoke in Italian, and I did not. I would know it. I could understand what they were telling me, but I never learned how to speak it. So I don't have a favorite word because I don't know many. Or if I do, I don't know if I'm using it in the right way or saying it in the right way. So I can't really answer that.
I do not speak Italian, but when my grandparents were living, they only spoke Italian to us. And so we didn't speak back, but we understood everything they said. But now that they have passed, we don't have that language in our home.
Yes, I do speak Italian. As a matter of fact, I am a retired Italian teacher. And my favorite phrase might be che cosa fai? Which means, what are you doing?
Because of my upbringing in Ybor City, again, that has been very beneficial to me. We grew up poor, but actually I was much richer than some of the Academy of Holy Names people, colleagues that I went to school with. I speak Italian simply because it was a way of life in Ybor City. Ybor City was a melting pot. So Italians came over and they worked in cigar factories, and those typically were owned by Cubans. So they would learn to speak Spanish first. And as they accumulated some money and some savings, then they would go on to have the Italian restaurants or have Italian spaghetti factories, those type of things. But in that same crazy setting that I said about what I liked with Italian tradition, it was not unusual. As a matter of fact, it was the common thing that you would start that type of interaction in English, and somebody else would break in Spanish. You'd have some conversation in Spanish, it would go to Italian, and it would come back. And it has helped me. It has helped me in my pharmacy career. It's helped me in my political career, because in some cases where somebody can't communicate other than English, you're able to do that in a trilingual type of relationship. So yes, because of that, and I didn't realize how beneficial it was at the time, but it was a matter of survival. Everybody was talking in crazy different languages, and you had to, come on, catch up. And so that's the way I learned it. Probably my favorite expression, because my father probably didn't go up to the first grade, not very educated, but very smart. And I learned a lot of things from him, more so than from somebody who had had a master's degree in something or a BS in something. And I remember when he used to tell me on different occasions for different situations, if I didn't know something and somebody was asking me about stuff, you respect the conversation, and if you don't know, you say it. So that it was a very convenient expression. It said, "Nende sacho." I don't understand it. I don't know. I just don't know. And it saved me a lot of times, even when I was a bad little kid doing something maybe mischievous, and I took it to that level, because if my dad or my mother or somebody asked me about, "Did you do that? Do you know who broke that?" I went, "Name this, Sacho. I don't know." That's not what he intended, but I found it useful for that in terms of defense.
My favorite phrase is, "Mi dispiace, io non posso parlare italiano." I'm terribly sorry, I don't speak Italian. I speak the ancient Sicilian language. It's not a dialect. I could go on and on about Italy. There's no such thing as a typical Italian. Italy is made up of 20 regions, and at one time, up to 1860, the unification of Italy, 1870, they spoke their own region language, even though they had made Tuscany the official language, the Toscana language, Florentine. Only till Mussolini became in power, he says, "We're going to speak one language, one school, Florentine." And that was the beginning of the Italian speaking one language. And but if you talk about dialects, there's 100. I was told there's 164 dialects throughout Italy.
Spaghetti.
So my favorite Italian food would have to be pasta, of course. Scacciata, pizza, but the authentic pizza. We have to have the margherita pizza, the good sauce. Anything that involves meat and sauce and some sort of like bread or carb. That's my food.
I love my grandma's recipe for her like red sauce for her spaghetti. It's awesome.
Jeez. That's not a fair question. I would have to say probably anything with marsala on it. I love veal, but good manicotti is always delicious too.
Well, when I was younger, it was a red sauce, which the southern Sicilians refer to as succo. The New York Italians refer to it as gravy. And it was usually it was done the day before you'd eat it. You would saute the onions, the garlic, the meat, and it was cooking all day. You could smell it, and I loved that. That was my favorite food growing up. But now it seems like the jars are gotten pretty good and easy. But one thing I love to do still is grow basil and make pesto, and the family enjoys that. So that's what I probably is my favorite food now.
My favorite Italian food is lasagna. I love lasagna, and we usually have it on special holidays. My favorite sweet is the Italian wedding cookies, cannolis, and of course piñolata.
My favorite Italian food would be lasagna, and my mom used to make it homemade, and I love that. I love almost everything Italian. My family made lots of things and lots of food. I like this one dish that my mom learned from Short Miss Allen, Lorraine Allen's mom, called caponata, and it's an eggplant salad. And I used to like that very much. I don't get to have it anymore because, of course, there's no one around. And I do have the recipe, but I wouldn't even attempt to try to make it.
Oh my goodness. I would have to say lasagna. That was lasagna is probably the favorite food, even though I honestly do not eat pasta. But if I were to eat it, lasagna would be my favorite one to eat.
Wow, Italian food, I don't know, that's a hard one. I really enjoy all kinds of pasta, and I think my favorite, which I like to order when I go to an Italian restaurant, is pasta carbonara.
I have to give you a disclaimer up front. My mom being Italian and Spanish, and my dad being 100% Italian, I should be like a supreme chef. My cooking abilities are this much, 0. I don't cook. I wouldn't advise anybody to eat my cooking. So there's not a recipe that I like, but as far as Italian, just plain old pasta col sugo, spaghetti and meatballs. People go off from there, ravioli and this and that, lasagna. But spaghetti and meatballs is my favorite if it's cooked right. Lots of times we take shortcuts. And so what we do is maybe ad-lib a little bit. Get a can of something or a bottle of something and throw it in there and add maybe some spices and some olive oil and some chopped garlic. But that's not real sugo to me. I remember my mother made her own sugo, and it took a long, long time. It wasn't one of these quick fix dinners that you could have done in 5 or 10 minutes. So although I don't cook, I sure do appreciate good cooking.
Well, I'll have to explain it this way. Our reception at the office once told me, Mr. Calderoni, why is it that Italian cooking is so favorable? I says, well, real easy, we cheated. She says, what do you mean you cheated? I said, look, we're made up of 20 different nations, and when you put 20 different nations, their best dishes together, how can you go wrong? They're all good.
It's true.
The early 1900s, from Sicily.
Okay, so I know that my family is Sicilian, and they came to Ybor City to start their life as cigar workers to raise their family, their gigantic family.
My great-grandfather came over, great-great-grandfather came over from Sicily in like 1880.
My father's family is from Naples, and they came here in the early 20th century, so right after World War I, early 1920s. My mother's family the same, they came about the same time, but they're actually Sicilian, so that was kind of an interesting dynamic as a kid growing up, because those are not the same cultures, and they are from an area not in Messina, but near Messina.
Well, my grandmother's father came to Florida in the 1880s, and my grandma was born in West Tampa in 1895. But my grandfather's father came in 1905, and both families settled in Tampa because there was a strong Tampa presence from the town in Sicily where both of my ancestors came from.
Yes. So my family came from Italy at the crack of the 20th century. That was around 1899. My maternal grandparents came from Sambuco, Alexandra della Rocca, and Santro Stefano. To be specific, their names were Antonina Rinaldo from Sambuco, Antonino Caltagirone from Alexandra de Rocca, Mariana Favata from Santo Stefano, Andrea Ferlita from Santo Stefano, Sarah Ciccarello from Santo Stefano, and Nicolo Masseri from Santo Stefano.
Okay, my parents came from, my father's family came to Tampa, and they came from Sicily. And Santo Stefano, I think that's what it's called. That's where his family came from. My mom's family was upper, it's not in the mainland of Italy, towards the bottom of the boot area, Calabria, I think it's called, and they went to New York. Supposedly, my father's side of the family, my mom was born here in the United States. My father, his mom, my grandmother, was pregnant to have him when they were coming to the United States. So he was the first one born of the brothers and sisters, and there were 9. He was the first one born here in the United States.
Goodness gracious. They came over, it was my grandmother and grandfather. They came over to Ellis Island. I do not know when, but I guess my grandfather might have been about 9 years old, if that. And came over and came to New York. And so my family was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York.
Yes, my grandparents on both my mother and father's side came from Sicily. My mother's side of the family was from San Biagio, Platani, and my father's side is from Santo Stefano, Cusquina, like many of the Italians that are here in Tampa as well. And they arrived here in the very early 1900s. Like 1908, 1911, around that time.
My grandfather came in the late 1800s, I believe. His name was Francisco. And he came from Santo Stefano. He was the original founder of our family bakery, which is, I'm very proud to have those roots. It's in Ybor City. It was a bakery that he started, and my dad and his brothers continued that business. And after that, I guess it was Sandy Friedman, mayor then, came up with a program called Urban Renewal. That whole area was forced to sell. Probably we would not have wanted to otherwise. But proudly enough, as a monument to my family history, it became a Ybor City Museum, and then the city bought it from us, and then the state bought it from them. And even to today, it sits there as a collection of artifacts of all the wonderful things that the immigrants melted and blended in Ybor City. Across the street, Centennial Park. My grandmother's house was right smack in the middle of that. So back to my grandfather and your first question. He started that bakery. They delivered on a horse and buggy. And then my father and his brothers continued that after my grandfather died. I have been told, I don't have any certainty, but I've been told that it was the first Cuban bread bakery, not necessarily just in the Tampa Bay area, but in a bigger area of our state. I don't know that. But I'm prejudiced, of course, so I think that no matter whether they're the first, the second, or the 20th, the bread from our bakery was just spectacular. Where my grandfather came up with this, I have no idea, but he named the bakery at first La Joven Francesa, which means the young French woman, or the French lady. Later, and I don't know when, because obviously I was too small to remember, or maybe not even born when they changed the name, then they changed it to Ferlita and Sons. But that was kind of a unique name, the young French lady, La Joven Francesa. So, had lots of history in Ybor City, lots of memories. Matter of fact, I went back to that bakery when I ran my very, very first political fundraiser when I announced in 1999 that although novice to politics, I was going to run for a citywide city council position. And I don't know if it was the good omen about what my father and my family left me, but we won against a very, very good incumbent that was there for 8 years, and we beat him, set Tampa history. We beat him by exactly 1 vote, citywide. Of course, they had about 7,000 recounts, and we still beat him. So that was the long answer to your short question.
My great-grandfather on my mother's side, they were pushed out of Spain, which really started in 1492. That was the glory and disgrace of Spain.
Very loving, and they all know each other.
So I believe that what makes Tampa unique about its Italian heritage is that everyone originated from Ybor City, and they were all trying to seek a better life with new jobs, and it doesn't matter if you were Cuban Italian, Mexican Italian, Spanish Italian, you just all wanted that better life for your family.
The Tampa Italian community is pretty special because it's so connected, and most Tampa Italians have been here for centuries, and their family's been here forever, long lineage, and it's all pretty close. Everyone knows each other.
That it has stayed fairly vibrant and strong, despite the fact that you have successive generations of people intermarrying and moving away and whatnot. So next to the Spanish/Cuban community here, it's probably the richest that we have.
Well, part of it is the Italians that are from the Tampa area are predominantly from one specific region in Sicily, which is the province of Agrigento. Our particular family is from a town called Santo Stefano Quisquina, and the town today only has 5,000 people, but our lineage, we had someone there trace it back to 500-600 years. But the people in Tampa all seem to have come from that specific area of Italy. So that's what's kind of unique about the Tampa connection. And I was fortunate enough to be involved about 26 years ago with the establishment of Tampa's Italian sister city, and we chose that specific reason because of the connection between the two cultures.
What I think is unique is that when all of these immigrants came to America, they all immigrated and poured themselves into Ybor City, Tampa. They weren't very skilled, and so they would get the cigar jobs in factories. They were very low paying, but they worked very hard and remained steadfast to the many challenges and obstacles that they encountered in this new country, and finally their efforts paid off.
I think what's unique is that they all know each other, and they're all somehow connected, cousin or relative. They all know each other from, especially when they all lived in Ybor City, the older generations. They all knew each other. They all, this one was related to this one was married to this one that was cousin, and they can explain the whole thing to you. You lose it after a while because you lost track of how they were related, but that they were all very close to one another.
I think that the Tampa Italian community is connected to each other. And because they're connected to each other, you find that especially for me, marrying an Italian, a Tampa Italian, that everybody knows everybody. And when the families get together, there's a lot of people, a lot of food, a lot of tradition, and it's really kind of nice.
Well, I think first of all, the sense that the Italian community of Tampa, especially of Ybor City, came from probably 4 or 5 towns in Sicily, the majority of them then, okay, the two of the towns which I mentioned. And so I think that's kind of unique. I think most Italians that come from other parts of the United States and they come to visit our community are surprised by how many people are from those, 3 or 4 villages in Sicily. So I think that makes us unique.
I don't think it's just specific to the Italian community. I think it's the role of the Italian community as they grew up and interacted. Again, I think our roots really go back to Ybor City. And I think the fact that Italians could interact with Cubans, could interact with Puerto Ricans, could interact with Orientals, could interact with African Americans. Everybody had their role there. And everybody appreciated each other's roles. And it wasn't about, I make more money, or you make more money, or my job is more important. They were very respectful of each other. And I think as children, we saw that. So hopefully some of that stayed with us, and we realized that that's the way a community is supposed to be.
Well, when I was a little boy on 7th Avenue, a small kid, if anyone spoke English on the sidewalk, I would turn around and wonder, what is he doing here? The language of the day in Ybor City, strictly Spanish or Sicilian. And I don't think there was 1% Italian in the whole city at the time. They were all Sicilians, all from one area of Sicily.
Learning how to speak Italian, because I have not done it yet.
I say embrace your culture and really just explore it, in whether it be food or traditions, and try to carry it on to other generations.
Just keep up the traditions and love your grandparents.
Embrace it. Make your parents and grandparents tell you things that they know about their experiences, the old country, if they remember it. Don't let them get away with forcing complete assimilation on you like my family did, because you're missing out.
Embrace your culture, particularly if you're Italian American descent. There's always a lot to learn, and it's always good to try to broaden your knowledge by visiting the country, specifically Sicily in my case, getting to know people. It's really enlightened your life, and it's changed a lot of things from raising our children to the culture that we've introduced into the family. So take all the good and throw out the bad, and you'll be happier for it.
I guess the message that should be left behind to our younger generations is that work ethic and strong family values, the love of God and the love of country is very important.
Oh, I think, and now if you have a chance to learn the language, learn it, because I think it's wonderful to have a second language. And I think the Italian language is so beautiful that, I think they should learn that. I think they should learn about their family history, the different things about their family and the culture and the traditions. Because I think we're losing it as time goes on. I think we're losing some of the nice traditions that Italian families have.
Well, yes. I think that the younger people need to get involved in their Italian families, in the community, the Italian community, so that the Italian, their Italian heritage can go on and on and on. And without their involvement, it will just die out.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I just stress and I hope that they will continue following in traditions and participating in traditions that we have ongoing here in Tampa, especially in Ybor City and through the Italian Club. I think that's very important that the young people come in and participate in that and learn about the traditions and the background. Study about your heritage, ask your family, ask the older generation about their traditions and their experiences when they came here, the early times in Ybor, and try and learn the language as well. I think that's very important.
Not just specifically to Italian, but of course that I'm partial to that. Many times children want to shy away from the fact that their parents are Hispanic. So even if they speak Spanish, they don't do it in public because they don't want to be made fun of, kind of a bullying type thing, a bullying defense. Or Italian, or anything else. I think no matter how modest our upbringing was, how poor you were, how rich you were, how in between you were, I think part of the fiber of the fabric that you were made of is about being proud of what was given to you. My dad and mom didn't have any assets. They didn't leave anything to us when they died, except for the fact that my father worked very, very hard to put us through college and not have to worry. And what they gave us was much richer than some sort of an estate. So we should never be, Italians for sure, but everybody else, we should never be embarrassed or not proud of the heritage we have. That's something that was given to us. We're very fortunate, I think, to be Italians. I think I know a lot of people, or maybe this is the way I see it, that would like to be Italian. Well, guess what? They can't. So that's something that I'm always proud of, and anytime I have an opportunity to talk about my heritage and my roots and what my Italian family gave me, man, I jump at that opportunity.
Well, I have to quote something my father had told me years ago. One of the proverbs. He says, as an Italian American, there's three things you never do. You never change your religion, you never change your wife, and you never change your name. And that's the way we were growing up. And talking about proverbs as a little boy, that was your education. Every time you did something wrong, my grandparents would shoot a proverb at me. I wish I had wrote all of them down. Some of them I just didn't understand, but some of them were. I have to tell you one proverb my grandfather kept nailing me with, one proverb. E quelli non lavora non mangia. Those that don't work, don't eat. And he was a fanatic about that. When we listened.
There's always a lot of family at the gatherings, and it's nice.
Being a part of an Italian family means to me that being an only child, the multiple cousins that I have around me, they just make up for my siblings. They honestly are my brothers and sisters, and that's what I really love about our culture.
It's special. It's like a bond like no other family to me.
Family is very important to us, but family is a very complex thing, and you can't take things for granted, but you should not feel obligated to do things that you don't want to do or be someone that you're not at the same time. So it's kind of a strange juxtaposition. But I do appreciate the complexity of it all, especially coming from Italian and Sicilian heritage.
Mm-hmm. Well, what's interesting, my family, my dad met my mom when he was in college in New Orleans, and he's, of course, of Italian descent. My mom is Anglo. But what's interesting about the Italians and my mom's family, and there's the common ground that I always found interesting, there was a love of family and a love of God. And that's pretty much sums up a lot of the Italian culture that I was brought up with. A lot of respect of family and loving your family. So we try to embrace that, and hopefully it grows with my children.
Okay, so what's important to me being in an Italian family is that I've been actually thinking about this a lot now that I'm getting older, and family dinners and hearing my parents say, "Mangia, mangia, let's get together," all the table talk of what's been going on in your day, how are things going. that's all like real important in the engagement of our relationships. And at the end of the day, one thing that remains constant is that you always know that the outpouring of their love is unconditional, whether through thick and thin of all the things you're going through. And they will never miss the opportunity to love and hug you just one more time.
Well, it means a lot of food. It means celebrating. I think the closeness, I think we're very close. I think the love that the family members have for one another. And that's what I think the Italian means to me, because it's always been family and caring and loving. And every time we were together, they might argue, and they might, have fights and arguing, but they all come back and they love each other. And we always had food. We always had plenty of food. I remember as a little boy, every time there was some kind of family gathering, we had more food than you could possibly ever want.
Mm-hmm. Oh, everything, family. Mm-hmm. It's I guess I would have to say it's all about family. Everybody cares about everybody. Everybody, wants to make everyone happy. You're sick. There's everybody who wants to make sure that they're doing everything they can to make you better. So I would have to say family and how much everybody cares for everyone else.
It means always having love and support from the family. Even though you may have disagreements like anyone else, I think that the family always comes together in the end. They support each other, they help each other, they are very involved in the lives of each other, especially the young people. I know being very supportive of events that the young people are involved in. And of course, the family dinners are such a nice tradition where everyone can get together from all ages and be at the table and hear stories and experiences from each other.
Well, being a part of an Italian family, I think that just wraps into what we've been talking about. The richness of our culture, the interacting of Italians in a family. Sometimes I find other types of families they're very stiff, for lack of a better word. They're very structured, they're very appropriate. To me, being Italian and Italian families lets you do what you want to do, within reason, of course, and be what you want to be. And they're just so proud of you. I mean, if my daddy had seen that I went into a pharmacy, or if I'd gone into politics before he died, he was always supportive of everything I did. And so I think that's part of the Italian culture, that they want to make sure that they're there for you, and whatever you do, whatever your choices are, they will support you, they will stand behind you, and they'll be very, very proud of you and the decisions that you made. I always found that to be the case, particularly with my dad.
Mm-hmm. Well, like I said before, the tight unity, it's not like today. No matter where I met my mother, even though she came to pick me up in the first grade, the first thing I did was kiss my mother in front of everybody. Later, when I grew up, my parents were in a restaurant, crowded restaurant, and I met them there on purpose or accidentally. We had to kiss our parents in front of everybody, in front of God and everyone. It didn't matter. That's something you had to do. And God help you if you walked into your grandmother's house and didn't kiss your grandparents. Boy, would you get a slap in the back of the head. You'll never forget it. But that's one thing I think that tradition, it really counts. And like I would tell my mother, I would talk about my grandparents. I said, Mom, God invented grandparents to take care of grandchildren. And that's the truth.
Pros, it's always someone I know, and the cons, well, I can't think of any.
So I think the funny pros is, of course, the Italian Nana. Always talking with your hands, and when you ask for recipes, she doesn't give away the specifics. She just kind of says, all right, get your bowl, throw in your pasta, throw in your sauce, put a little bit of meatballs, and bada bing, bada boom, you got yourself some good pasta. She never says, you know, her secret ingredients. So I think that's always funny.
My grandma like definitely gets me to eat every single bit of food. Or she'll make food even when I'm not hungry and make me eat it. That sort of stuff.
Grandma definitely made me eat too much. Pros would be that we all enjoy to be around other people, not just each other. I don't know about other Italian or Sicilian families, but we are not. We don't isolate ourselves. You know, we love to be around people of other cultures and just spend time with other people, talking and eating and drinking. Cons would be being raised by a Catholic mother with a Catholic grandmother, and the guilt trips. I naturally feel guilty about every naughty thing that I do because I feel like they're always looking over my shoulder. So that would be a funny con.
Well, the pros and cons of being Italian. Some of the interesting things growing up, because I didn't speak Italian. As an Italian family, you always ended up at the kitchen table. The family was having coffee, even if you weren't, drinking coffee. You were sitting there listening to conversation, and what would always happen, it would start in Italian, or start in English, switch to Italian, usually in between while your name was mentioned and you're wondering what's going on. So the pros and cons were you could, enjoy the conversation until they wanted to talk about a little bit more serious, and then it switched to Italian.
I think is everything revolves around food. And we've all heard the saying, do we starve a fever or do we feed a fever? It's always like a dilemma, but when you're Italian, it really doesn't matter. You're going to feed both. Plus, like another funny thing, like I always notice, like on Sundays, and my mom's serving dinner and stuff. It's like, just tell me how much you want. Tell me when enough is enough. And so they're scooping. Okay, Mom, that's enough. That's plenty. And then it's like, oh, okay. And then you get one more scoop anyway. It just really doesn't matter. They're going to give you what they want.
My Italian, it was funny. I had an uncle and aunt, and my aunt and uncle would give me a Christmas gift, and they would say, "This is for you." And then my aunt would take me in the room later on and give me $10 more, and she would take it out of her secret compartment that my uncle didn't know, and she would say, "Here, what he doesn't know doesn't hurt him," and she would give me like extra $10 or whatever. And back to the food, one time we had a large maniscalco. This is going back when I was a little boy, but I remember it because it was a lot of people, and they had a family reunion of the Maniscalco family. And we were all at, I think it was Fort DeSoto Park. And everybody was responsible for bringing food. And they had this whole table lined up with all the food that they had brought. And we took the whole pavilion, but there was one table that was another organization. And these people came late. And they came and they saw all the food. And so they got in line with our family, even though they were not part of the family. They got in line because they thought that was the food for them. And they said, "Can you believe? Look at the food that they have. We've never had food like this at our meetings. We only usually have hot dogs. And look, they have lasagna and spaghetti and chicken and Italian sausage and all this thing." And they couldn't believe, and they were just filling up their plates. And my aunts and uncles were watching them, and they didn't have the heart to tell them because they were so excited that they were getting all this food that really wasn't their food, that their food was at the other table where they had hot dogs and potato chips. But we let them I remember watching them, and they let them take the food to whatever they were eating, and they ate that. And they came back and they said it was the best food that they had ever had.
I guess, goodness, about being Italian. I guess everybody expects you to be that person to do the cooking. to be that person to invite everyone over, the family, and have everybody over to have a good time. And so being Italian, because it's all about family, it's when can you get together again, and you know, who's going to bring what, and how much food can we have, and there's never too much food. And I would say the con would be that I guess if families do not speak the language or pass on their heritage in an Italian family, it just goes away. And I think that, you know, I just think that it is so important that if you know, the members of the family do not continue to let it to move on, you know, that's a sad thing. It does happen, especially when people, you know, especially the young ones start moving away out of colleges and, you know, and that. So.
Okay, well, the con is that there's too much good Italian food, and it's very hard to refrain from eating all the delicious food. And of course, when you go to visit someone, whether it be here in the States or going to visit an Italian family, or especially if you're in Italy, everybody wants you to mangia, mangia, mangia. So, I mean, that's a good thing in a way because it's all so good, but it can be very hard to refuse any food given to you from an Italian.
Well, you know, you have to remember that my background is a blend of Italian and Spanish. And a lot of their demands and a lot of their pushiness in terms of what they think is good for you is about the same. Obviously, if you're Italian and you're at a family gathering and you're not eating so much that you have to unbutton your waist belt, they think that you're sick, or they think you don't like the food. You almost have to just really eat more than you want to, because otherwise they're offended or they think something is wrong. So that's overall, that's just a general rule.
I'll just tell you what my grandfather would say, but my grandmother would always say, manja, eat, eat. And my mother, when I was a kid, and if I wouldn't eat everything off my plate, she says, Joe, eat all your food because the kids in Italy are starving. So I would force myself to eat the remaining on the plate. Then my first trip years ago, after the war, in Milano, I went to a cafeteria, and I was watching. They were piling food on their plates. It was unbelievable. And I was thinking of my mother. My mother lied to me. They're not starving. Look how they're eating. Well, they did that at noon. That's their main course is noon. Breakfast is very light, and evening is very, very light. But noon, they eat as if it's going out of style. But we don't do that in this country.
I have not. I either want to go to Sicily or Rome. Rome because Colosseum. Sicily because my family was there.
I have not been to Italy myself, but that's something I really would love to explore.
Been to Rome, Florence, Venice, and all over Sicily. I really love Rome. It's I like the history behind it and everything.
No, I have not yet.
Do you have any parts that you want to go to?
I would love to see Rome and Tuscany, and I'd like to go back to Naples to see where my family is from, and then I would like to take a trip to Sicily and see what Sicily is like. So pretty much all of it.
I visited Italy, I think, 5 or 6 times, and the first time I was fortunate enough to travel with my mother and father. We went as part of a sister city exchange with the mayor of Tampa, and on one of the free days, we were able to visit the specific town that my dad's father was born in, and it's also the origin of our family. And it's in a town or a city that's about 5,000 feet above sea level, so it's pretty high up there, and it's in a valley with mountains surrounding it, and it's a beautiful area. And part of the visit, we were taken up on top of one of the highest peaks surrounding the town that overlooks the city, and they had built a a special church to St. Cologio, which has a breathtaking view, and one of my favorite times was seeing my dad's reaction when he overlooked, and he made a comment, something about how Columbus must have felt when he first discovered America, because seeing my dad's enthusiasm of seeing his father's town was really an amazing sight. So that was probably my favorite, although I've had many after so many visits.
No, I haven't been, but it is a trip that I definitely have on a bucket list, and I can't wait to go to the Rome and the Vatican and see all the architectural designs and concepts and enjoy the food and the lifestyle that they live there.
No, I have never been to Italy. One of the teachers that used to work here, Dr. Musgrove, is there right now, and she sent me pictures of the Vatican, and that's my wish, that maybe one day I will get to go to Italy and Rome and see all the sites and the Vatican too.
Have not been to Italy.
Do you have
Nope.
any parts you want to go to?
Sicily. My husband is Sicilian, and Santo Stefano is where his family is from, so he would like to go to Sicily to visit.
I have been to Italy many times. The first time was when I was in high school. My Spanish teacher took a group of students, and we visited several countries, including Italy. And after that, I went to study twice at the University of Urbino, that is off the Adriatic in the Marche region. And my best friend and I went to study twice during the summers. And I think that was like one of the best experiences, because we were in a very small town. There were not a lot of tourists there. We really had an opportunity to learn about the people, the way of life. We were able to experience it with the inhabitants of the small town there. And of course, we definitely became more proficient in our language skills of Italian. So I think those were that was probably, those two trips studying at the university was the most enjoyable, even though they've all been good and they've all been with friends and all have experienced different places and things. But I think those 2 times were my favorite.
I'm so sorry that it's going to be a very short answer. No, I never have. I've always worked very hard in my life and never have sculptured out the time to go. I would like to go. I've got relatives, I think still, from my mother's side, my grandmother on my mother's side, all the way up close to the border of Switzerland, a little town called Pavia. And then of course on my father's side, all the way down to Sicily. So that's a mistake for me. That's a mistake that I never did it. And hopefully I'll have the opportunity to go before I leave this world, because that's something that I was foolish not to take advantage of earlier. But hopefully it's not too late.
Now that's hard to say. I've been to Italy 10 times, up and down the peninsula, and each city, each area is so different. You just can't say Rome is better than Florence or Florence is better than Milano. Each one are different. Each one are different culture because of the region. But I always tell the Italians, just in case the cab driver's giving me a bad time, I always come up with Italia per me è paradiso del mondo. For me, Italy is the paradise of the world, and that changed their whole attitude towards me. But the thing about Italy, it would take 2 lifetimes to see all the art and culture of Italy.
Definitely food-wise, and just like how we like live.
I think the Italian culture has impacted American society through like even chains like Olive Garden and Carrabba's and Macaroni Grill. Like even that, even though it's not like truly authentic, it really has provided Americans to have their own little taste of Italy.
It's made everyone love pasta.
That's true.
It's definitely shown some it's definitely pushed some boundaries and shown some like different affection towards people.
That's an interesting question. How has Italian culture influenced American society? Definitely through food, for sure. Even though certain things that we eat here in America that we think of as, you know, truly Italian is not actually Italian, like pizza, for example. But something about the nature of the culture and the friendliness of it, and the fact that we are kind of fun-loving people that just want to enjoy life, which I know exists in lots of other cultures, but there's something about the Italian character, I think, is a big part of who we are. So that and music, for those of us that do enjoy opera.
Well, the thing that comes to mind first is the influence that an Italian neighbor of Thomas Jefferson had, probably, that most people don't realize, that he was a scholar and a friend, an intellectual contemporary of Thomas Jefferson, and it was in his writings that Thomas Jefferson developed the phrase that all men are created equal, that is kind of the basis of our Declaration of Independence that people use, and those words were really rooted in an Italian American. So if nothing else, that one phrase, I think, sums up how the Italians have and can influence the culture of America, usually for the better.
I think Italian Americans have influenced the close-knit family structure that we exhibit in America, and plus instilling the importance of tradition and never forgetting that La Familia is who loves you most.
Okay, I think influence. Well, that's a hard one. I think it's influenced sometimes the architect of some of the buildings in our country. I think the food, naturally. I think, there isn't, you ask most of the kids here at school what their favorite foods are, and it's either pizza, it's either spaghetti, it's something Italian. It's neat, and even if they're not Italian, that's what their favorite foods are. So I think they have had Italian culture has had an influence on Americans and what we eat. I think that's, you ask most people what their favorite food to eat is, and they'll say Italian. I don't know. I think that's a hard one to answer. I don't really have an answer for that.
It's a bit tougher.
It is a bit tougher. I would say the Italian culture, because of its deep roots in its, in its heritage, the deep roots in its heritage, they continue, they continue on, and I think that because the Italians are so much about family, about other people, I think it makes its mark in the community because of that. There's always a way to be together, to invite new people into your home or into your lives, and I believe the Italian heritage, does, promote that.
Well, the culture has been very influential. Of course, the food. I think, food is very popular, but the music, entertainment, architecture-wise, you see a lot of influence from Italy, and of course the early times of our buildings in the United States, New York, Washington, even here in Tampa, they were influenced by or completed by artisans that were from Italy. So I think we have a lot of influence in architecture, music, food, entertainment. And there's so many entertainers too that are of Italian background.
I think Italian culture continues to influence the American society if those that are representative of our culture do the right things, hold tight to our culture and to the customs that they've brought over, because we're all immigrants really, or if it's not us, our parents, or if not their parents. But if they do it in a tasteful way and introduce their customs and their culture into the melting pot called the United States of America, then it's going to be very exemplary of what Italians have to offer. And then of course each with their own abilities, be it art, be it cooking, be it restaurants, be it whatever. If they're tasteful in how they bring that to our community, then the rest of the non-Italians that we interact with will appreciate some of the customs that we can introduce. I think, again, of course I'm speaking as an Italian, so guess what, probably I'm a little bit partial. But I think we have such rich customs that if we continue to incorporate those into our United States life, we have so much to offer. So we have to do from one Italian singly to one whole class of Italians and to the next generation and to the next generation. We need to make it our responsibility, continue to remind people what Italy and Italians have to offer. And if we represent that well, by the way we act, and by the way we behave, and the way we handle ourselves, people would appreciate what Italy, Italians, and Italian descents have to offer this country.
Well, if the Americans would only look at the culture and the history of the Italians, they could learn a lot. The architect and art. Italy has everything that we have, but in a different manner. The only thing about the Italians, they're not. They could be a great country if they only could get their act together on their government. And but the movies are hard to understand, but they're the type of movie that you couldn't stand when you looked at them, but you never forget them. So, but anyway, La Dolce Vita is one of my favorite. That I walked out of there and I couldn't understand what was going on, but later each plot really had a good story.
Okay, those are all the questions.
That's it?
Yeah, it was 10.
Okay. Well, that went fast.